Magnolia Beaumont stood in the ankle-deep mud, her worn boots squelching as she watched the townspeople of Willow Creek point and whisper from the safety of the wooden boardwalk. "Look at poor Maggie, inherited nothing but mosquito-infested swampland," cackled Mrs. Pritchard, her voice carrying across the humid Louisiana morning air. "Should have sold it to the Ashworth family when they offered $50 last month." The laughter stung worse than the mosquito bites covering Magnolia's arms, but she refused to turn away. Her father's dying words echoed in her mind. "That land holds secrets, Maggie girl. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The other ranchers' daughters had inherited prime cattle land, fertile fields, and comfortable inheritances. She'd received 20 acres of seemingly worthless wetland that everyone agreed was fit only for gators and water moccasins. "Magnolia Beaumont, you get out of that swamp this instant." The commanding voice belonged to Beauregard Ashworth III, the banker's son whose family owned half the county. His pristine white shirt and perfectly pressed trousers marked him as someone who'd never worked a day in actual dirt. "Father's offer still stands, $60 for the whole plot. Take it before the land value drops even further." She turned to face him, mud streaking her calico dress, wild auburn hair escaping from her braid. "And why would your daddy want worthless swampland, Beau? Seems mighty peculiar for a man who only invests in sure things." Beauregard's face flushed red beneath his perfectly groomed mustache. "We're being charitable, considering your ... circumstances. A young lady shouldn't be wallowing in filth like some common field hand." The crowd murmured agreement, but Magnolia noticed something else the way Beauregard's eyes kept darting to the eastern corner of her property, where strange black seepage had been bubbling up through the cypress roots. Her pulse quickened as pieces clicked together. The Ashworth family had been sniffing around her land for months, even before her father's death. They'd made increasingly generous offers for property everyone claimed was worthless. "If it's so worthless," she called out, her voice carrying across the square, "then why are you so eager to take it off my hands?" A new voice cut through the tension. "'Cause smart money recognizes opportunity when it sees it." Magnolia turned to see a tall stranger dismounting from a travel-worn horse, his clothes dusty from the road but his eyes sharp with intelligence. He had the weathered look of someone who'd worked hard for everything he owned, and something about his confident stride made her heart skip unexpectedly. "And you are?" Beauregard demanded, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "Jasper Caldwell," the stranger replied, tipping his hat to Magnolia with a slight smile that made her stomach flutter. "Geologist from Texas, heard there might be some interesting formations in these parts." The word geologist sent a ripple of unease through the crowd, and Magnolia saw Beauregard's jaw tighten. Her father had mentioned something about rock formations, about paying attention to what lay beneath the surface. As Jasper's warm brown eyes met hers across the muddy space, she realized her inheritance might be worth more than anyone imagined, and that her life was about to change in ways she'd never expected. Masculine, a geologist? Beauregard's voice cracked slightly, though he quickly composed himself. What possible interest could Texas rock formations have in our humble Louisiana swampland? Jasper stepped closer to Magnolia, and she caught the scent of leather and something uniquely that made her pulse race. "Miss Beaumont, I believe? I'd like to discuss your property if you're willing. Privately." "Now, see here," Beauregard interjected, moving protectively toward Magnolia despite having just insulted her moments before. "Miss Beaumont doesn't need to speak with strange men about her affairs. The Ashworth family has been looking after the Beaumonts for years." Magnolia's temper flared. "Looking after us? You mean like when your daddy foreclosed on the Hendersons last winter? Or when you charged Widow Patterson triple interest on her late husband's debts?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "I'll speak with whomever I please, Beauregard Ashworth." The crowd gasped at her boldness, but Jasper's appreciative grin made warmth spread through her chest. "I like a woman who speaks her mind," he said quietly, meant only for her ears. "Your father was right to trust you with this land." "You knew my father?" Shock colored her voice. "We corresponded. He suspected what I've come to confirm." Jasper glanced meaningfully at the black seepage she'd noticed earlier, but not here with half the town listening. Mrs. Pritchard sniffed loudly. "Magnolia Beaumont, you can't possibly be considering meeting alone with this ... This drifter. What would your dear departed father say? He'd say I should listen when someone has information about my inheritance, Magnolia replied firmly. She turned to Jasper, acutely aware of how his presence made her feel both nervous and excited. Meet me at the old oak by Cypress Creek at sunset. We can talk privately there. Beauregard stepped forward aggressively. I forbid it. Magnolia, you're clearly not thinking straight. The grief has addled your judgment. You forbid it? Magnolia's voice rose dangerously. Since when do you have any say over my actions, Beau? Ashworth. Last I checked, you weren't my husband, my father, or my keeper. The public rebuke made Beauregard's face turn purple with rage and embarrassment. You'll regret this, Magnolia, mark my words. When you're left with nothing but worthless mud and broken promises, don't come crying to the Ashworth family for help. I wouldn't dream of it, she shot back, as the crowd began to disperse. Buzzing with gossip about the confrontation, Jasper moved closer. You've got backbone, Miss Beaumont. That's good, you'll need it for what's coming. What exactly is coming? She asked, though part of her was more focused on the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Change, he said simply. Big change. But first, I need to show you something that'll make sense of everything. He mounted his horse, pausing to look down at her. And Miss Beaumont? Where's something you don't mind getting dirty? We'll be doing some digging. As he rode away, Magnolia felt a mixture of anticipation and fear. Behind her, she could hear Beauregard, giving sharp orders to his men, and she realized that whatever Jasper had to show her, the Ashworth family was determined to stop it. The stakes were higher than she'd imagined, and somehow, the handsome stranger from Texas held the key to everything. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the horizon, and she had a feeling that by morning nothing in Willow Creek would ever be the same. Magnolia arrived at the ancient oak as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the Spanish moss, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd changed into her oldest work dress, the one she wore for mucking stalls, but had spent an embarrassing amount of time arranging her hair. The contradictions in her own behavior mystified her. She was meeting this man for business, yet she couldn't stop thinking about the way his eyes had lingered on her face. Jasper was already waiting, leather satchel at his feet and what looked like surveying equipment spread across a blanket. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms that made her mouth go dry. Right on time, he said, rising to greet her. I was beginning to think Ashworth might have convinced you to stay away. Beau Ashworth couldn't convince me the sky was blue if I had eyes in my head, she replied, then immediately regretted the unladylike response. Something about Jasper made her forget her manners entirely. His laugh was rich and warm. Your father said you had spirit? He also said you had his eye for reading the land. Jasper gestured to the equipment. Tell me, Miss Beaumont, what do you see when you look at your swampland? Magnolia considered the question seriously, studying the wetland visible through the trees. Most folks see useless mud and standing water. But my daddy taught me to look deeper, the way the water moves in certain spots, like there's pressure underneath. The plants that grow in some areas but not others. And lately, she hesitated, then decided to trust him. There's been a smell, sweet and sharp, coming up from the ground near where the old creek used to run. Jasper's eyes lit up with excitement. Petroleum seepage. Your father was right, you do have the gift. He pulled a folded paper from his satchel. This is a geological survey of the area, based on samples your father sent me over the past year, Miss Beaumont. You're sitting on top of one of the richest oil deposits in Louisiana. The words hit her like a physical blow. Oil? You mean like the black stuff there? Drilling for in Texas? Exactly like that. Conservative estimates put your 20 acres at a value of at least $10 million. Jasper stepped closer, his voice urgent. But Magnolia, I call you Magnolia, the Ashworth family suspects. That's why they've been pressuring you to sell. $10 million. The sum was so enormous, she couldn't even comprehend it. But if you knew, if my father knew, why didn't he? Because he was a wise man who understood that information like this needs to be handled carefully. The Ashworths have enough money and influence to cause you serious trouble. if they think you're standing between them and a fortune. A twig snapped in the underbrush behind them, and both turned sharply. Magnolia's blood chilled as she recognized the sounds of horses and men moving through the trees. "They followed me," she whispered. Jasper was already gathering his equipment. "We need to get you somewhere safe. They see this survey too late for that stranger." Beauregard emerged from the trees with 3 of his father's hired men, all armed. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, and his eyes held a dangerous glint. "Step away from Miss Beaumont. She's coming with us." "Like hell I am," Magnolia said, but one of the men had already moved to flank her. "You don't understand the situation you're in, Magnolia," Beauregard said, his voice taking on a menacing tone she'd never heard before. "That land legally belongs to my family. Your father owed us debts that weren't properly recorded before his death. We can produce documentation proving ownership." "That's impossible," Magnolia protested, but doubt crept into her voice. "The Ashworths owned the bank, the courthouse, and half the judges in the county." Jasper stepped protectively in front of her. "Forged documents won't hold up under federal scrutiny. And when word gets out about the oil deposits, there'll be plenty of scrutiny." Beauregard's smile was cold. "Who's going to report it? Is a dead drifter and a missing woman? Accidents happen all the time in the swamps?" The threat hung in the air like the humid evening mist, and Magnolia realized that her newfound wealth had also made her a target. As the hired men closed in, she caught Jasper's eye and saw him calculating their odds. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but something in his expression told her he wasn't giving up without a fight. "Run," Jasper whispered urgently, then suddenly lunged forward, tackling the nearest gunman. "Head for the deep swamp. They won't follow on horseback." Magnolia didn't hesitate. Years of navigating the wetlands as a child served her well as she plunged into the murky water, her skirts hampering her movement, but adrenaline driving her forward. Behind her she heard the sounds of struggle, men shouting, and a gunshot that made her heart stop. "Jasper," she called out, but forced herself to keep moving deeper into the maze of cypress and Spanish moss. "Keep going." "Ah!" His voice reached her. From somewhere behind, strained but alive, relief flooded through her as she heard him crashing through the underbrush in pursuit. "After them." Beauregard's voice was shrill with fury. "They can't have gone far." Magnolia knew these swamps like her own heartbeat. She led Jasper through hidden channels and over fallen logs, using every childhood hiding place her father had shown her. They moved in darkness now, guided only by moonlight filtering through the canopy and the sound of each other's labored breathing. Finally, when the sounds of pursuit had faded, they reached a small island where an abandoned trapper's cabin stood on stilts above the waterline. Magnolia hauled herself up onto the rickety porch, then turned to help Jasper. In the moonlight, she could see blood seeping through his shirt. "You're hurt," she said, her hands already reaching to examine the wound. "Just a graze," he said, though. His face was pale. We're lucky they weren't better shots. Inside the cabin, Magnolia lit an old oil lamp she knew would be there. Her father had maintained several such refuges throughout the swamp. The warm light revealed Jasper's wound was indeed minor, but she insisted on cleaning and bandaging it with strips torn from her petticoat. The intimate act of tending his injury made her acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his skin. Under her fingers, the way he watched her face as she worked. "You saved my life back there," she said softly. "You saved mine too. I never would have found my way through that maze in the dark." His hand covered hers as she finished with the bandage. "Magnolia, what we discovered tonight, it changes everything. But it also puts you in terrible danger." "I know." She didn't move her hand away from his. Beau was serious about those forged documents. The Ashworths have enough influence to make them stand up in court, at least long enough to steal my land. Not if we move fast. I have contacts in the federal government, men, who can ensure this gets handled properly. But we need to get those geological surveys to them, and we need to get you somewhere safe while the legal proceedings happen. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, the lamplight creating an intimate circle around them. Magnolia found herself studying the planes of Jasper's face, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the sincerity in his eyes when he spoke about protecting her. "Why?" she asked suddenly. Why are you doing this? Could have made a deal with the Ashworths, taken a percentage, and avoided all this danger. Jasper was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing patterns on her hand. Because your father trusted me with something precious, not just information about the oil, but his daughter's future. And because... He met her eyes directly. Because from the moment I saw you standing in that swamp, refusing to be intimidated, I knew you were worth fighting for. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibility. Magnolia felt her breath catch as Jasper's free hand came. Up to cup her cheek, as the cabin, the danger, even the fortune beneath her feet, everything faded, except the warmth in his eyes and the gentle pressure of his lips as he leaned down to kiss her outside. An owl called through the darkness, and, somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sounds of the Ashworth search party still hunting through the swamps. But for this moment, wrapped in lamplight and newfound love, Magnolia felt like the richest woman in Louisiana. Dawn broke gray and misty over the swampland, and with it came the distant sound of dogs barking. Magnolia jerked awake from where she'd dozed against Jasper's shoulder. The previous night's kiss still tingling on her lips, despite the immediate danger. Bloodhounds, Jasper said grimly, already moving to extinguish the lamp. They must have brought them from the next county over. Magnolia's mind raced. The Ashworths were escalating beyond anything she'd imagined. Using tracking dogs meant they intended to find her no matter what. There's only one place they won't follow, she said, gathering her resolve. Devil's Throat, Jasper frowned. What's Devil's Throat? A sinkhole about a mile north of here. Local legend says it's bottomless and the water's black as tar. Even the bravest hunters won't go near it. She met his eyes. But I know something they don't. There's a cave system behind the waterfall that feeds into it. My daddy showed me when I was 12, made me promise never to tell a soul. The baying of the hounds was getting closer, accompanied by shouts and the splash of men moving through the swamp. Beauregard's voice carried over the water. Find them. I don't care if you have to drag every inch of this god-forsaken swamp. They slipped out of the cabin and back into the dark water, moving silently through channels that grew progressively deeper and more treacherous. The morning mist provided cover, but Magnolia could hear the search party gaining ground. Her heart pounded as they approached Devil's Throat, a perfectly circular pool of black water surrounded by limestone cliffs. With a thin waterfall cascading down one side, it looks like something out of hell, Jasper breathed. That's the point. Magnolia led him around to the back of the waterfall, where an opening barely wide enough for two people was hidden behind the cascade. Hold your breath and follow me. The cave behind the waterfall was larger than it appeared from outside, with smooth limestone walls and a pocket of air that had sustained her and her father during a terrible storm years ago. They surfaced in the hidden chamber, gasping and shivering, but safe from immediate pursuit. Listen, Magnolia whispered. Outside, they could hear the search party approaching Devil's Throat. Dogs won't go any further, came a voice. Magnolia recognized as one of Beauregard's hired men. There. Spooked bad? Cowards, all of you, Beauregard snarled. Ash. They couldn't have just vanished. Maybe they drowned, suggested another voice hopefully. This place has a reputation for swallowing folks whole. There was a long pause, then Beauregard's voice, closer now. If they're dead, I want to see bodies. If they're alive, I want them found. Double the men and expand the search. Send word to my father. Tell him to expedite those property documents. I want legal ownership of the Beaumont land filed before sunset. As the sounds of the search party faded, Magnolia felt a mixture of relief and despair. They were safe for the moment, but trapped. He's really going to steal my land, she said, the weight of it hitting her fully. Jasper pulled her close, his wet shirt doing nothing to diminish the comfort of his embrace. Not if I have anything to say about it. Magnolia, I need to tell you something I should have mentioned last night. She looked up at him, noting the serious tone in his voice. I'm not just a geologist. I work for the Federal Bureau of Land Management. Your father contacted us months ago with suspicions about oil deposits and concerns about the Ashworth family's business practices. We've been building a case against them for bank fraud and property manipulation. The revelation stunned her. You're a federal agent? Among other things. And everything I said about caring for you that's real, Magnolia? It's more real than anything I've felt in my life. His hands framed her face gently. But it also means I have the authority to protect you and your property rights. The Ashworths don't know they're about to walk into a federal investigation. Hope bloomed in her chest, followed immediately by a new fear. What if they hurt you? What if he silenced her with a kiss that was both tender and fierce, full of promise and determination? Then they'll have to answer to the United States government. But that's not going to happen because we're going to be smart about this. As they sat in their limestone sanctuary, planning their next move, Magnolia realized that the frightened girl who'd stood in the swamp yesterday was gone. Forever. In her place was a woman who'd found both love and the strength to fight for what was rightfully hers. By noon, the cave had become stifling, but the sounds of the search had finally faded completely. Jasper consulted a waterproof compass from his pack and studied the limestone formations. There should be another way out of here, he said. Cave systems like this usually have multiple entrances. They spent the next hour exploring deeper into the cavern, following a narrow passage that gradually sloped upward. Magnolia's dress was completely ruined, her hair a tangle of moss and cave dust, but she'd never felt more alive. The way Jasper looked at her like she was brave and beautiful despite her bedraggled appearance made her feel capable of anything. The passage opened onto a ledge overlooking the main part of Willow Creek from the north side, nearly 2 miles from where they'd started. From this vantage point, they could see unusual activity in town federal agents in dark suits moving through the streets, and a line of wagons that definitely weren't local. My backup arrived, Jasper said with satisfaction. Right on schedule. Planned this? The investigation? Yes? Falling in love with you? He turned to her with that crooked smile that made her knees weak. That was completely unexpected. They made their way down the cliff face and into town through back alleys, avoiding the main streets where Beauregard's men might spot them. Jasper led her to the hotel, where a stern-faced woman in a traveling suit was waiting in the lobby. Agent Caldwell, the woman said crisply. I trust you have the geological surveys. Safe and sound, Agent Morrison, along with Miss Beaumont, who can testify to the harassment and threats made by the Ashworth family. Jasper's demeanor had shifted to something more professional, but his hand remained protectively at Magnolia's elbow. Agent Morrison studied Magnolia with sharp eyes. Miss Beaumont, are you prepared to make a formal statement about the events of the past 24 hours? Yes, ma'am, Magnolia said, lifting her chin with determination. I want to press charges for attempted kidnapping and death threats. Excellent. We've been gathering evidence of the Ashworth family's fraudulent business practices for months. Your case gives us grounds for immediate arrests. Morrison gestured toward the hotel dining room. Shall we get started? The next several hours passed in a blur of statements, signatures, and legal documents. Magnolia learned that the federal government would be placing her land under protection while the oil rights were properly assessed and leased through legitimate channels. More importantly, she discovered that her father had been far more savvy than she'd realized. His correspondence with Jasper had created a paper trail that would make any Ashworth forgeries obviously fraudulent. As afternoon faded to evening, commotion erupted in the street outside. Through the hotel windows, they watched as federal agents arrested Beauregard and his father, along with several of their associates. The town's corrupt judge was also taken into custody, his face purple with indignation as he was loaded into a federal wagon. It's over, Jasper said softly, moving to stand beside Magnolia at the window. You're safe now. She watched Beauregard being dragged past in shackles, his perfectly groomed appearance finally as disheveled as his schemes. Instead of satisfaction, she felt only a profound sense of relief. What happens now? Now you become one of the wealthiest women in Louisiana, Agent Morrison said dryly. The oil leases alone will generate more income than most people see in 10 lifetimes. I suggest you hire a good attorney and a better accountant. Magnolia nodded, but her attention was focused on Jasper. And what about you? Do you go back to Texas, now that your job is done? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with all the uncertainty of their whirlwind romance. Jasper took her hands in his, oblivious to the federal agents and hotel staff bustling around them. My job is done, he said carefully. But my life here with I hope that's just beginning. His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her. Magnolia Beaumont, I know we've only known each other 2 days, but I can't imagine leaving you. Will you let me stay?
What?
Will you let me court you properly? The smile that spread across her face was radiant enough to light the entire hotel lobby. Jasper Caldwell, I thought you'd never ask. 6 months later, Magnolia stood in the parlor of her new mansion, watching through lace curtains as oil derricks pumped steadily across what had once been dismissed as worthless swampland. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was now the wealthiest woman in 3 counties. But the riches felt secondary to the contentment that filled her days. Mrs. Caldwell? The voice belonged to her new housekeeper, a kindly woman who still seemed amazed by Magnolia's insistence on doing her own gardening. Your husband is back from New Orleans with the architect's plans, Mrs. Caldwell. The title still sent a warm thrill through her, even 3 months after their wedding. The ceremony had been the social event of the decade, with representatives from oil companies, federal officials, and half the Louisiana legislature in attendance. But Magnolia's favorite moment had been when Jasper had whispered, I love you, Swamp Witch, as they'd exchanged vows, making her laugh so hard she'd nearly dropped her bouquet. Jasper entered the parlor with his arms full of rolled papers and his face bright with excitement. Wait until you see what they've designed for the school, he said, spreading the plans across her mahogany desk. 3 stories, a proper laboratory, and a library that'll rival anything in New Orleans. The Magnolia Beaumont School for Children was her pet project, a free institution that would serve the children of poor farming families who'd never had access to quality education. Having grown up knowing the shame of hand-me-down textbooks and abbreviated schooling, she was determined that no child in Willow Creek would face those limitations. It's perfect, she breathed, studying the detailed drawings. And the teacher, housing, right here. Jasper pointed to a cluster of smaller buildings. Comfortable apartments that'll attract the best educators from across the South. No more one-room schoolhouses with undertrained teachers. Magnolia traced the plans with one finger, marveling at how much her world had changed. The oil money had brought opportunities she'd never imagined. But it was Jasper's love and support that had given her the confidence to dream big. He'd resigned from the federal agency to help her manage her newfound wealth and had proven to be as brilliant with business as he was with geology. There's something else, Jasper said, his voice taking on a particular tone that made her look up sharply. The doctor in New Orleans confirmed what we suspected. Her hand went instinctively to her still flat stomach, and the smile that spread across her face could have powered the oil pumps outside. You're certain? Completely certain. Our child will be born in the spring. He crossed to her chair and knelt beside it, his hands covering hers. How do you feel about that, Mrs. Caldwell? Feel like the luckiest woman who ever inherited a swamp, she said, leaning down to kiss him thoroughly. A commotion outside interrupted them, the sound of carriages and excited voices. Through the window, they could see a delegation from the state government arriving, no doubt with another proposal for infrastructure development or tax incentives. Magnolia's oil fortune had transformed not just her life, but the entire region's economy. Duty calls, Jasper said with a rueful smile. But Magnolia shook her head. Let them wait 5 minutes. I want to savor this moment. She gestured toward the window where the late afternoon sun was turning the derricks into silhouettes against a golden sky. Do you ever think about that night in the cave? When we thought we might not make it out alive. Every day, he said seriously. It was the night I realized I'd rather die beside you than live safely without you. Such a romantic, she teased. But her eyes were bright with unshed tears of happiness. The sound of knocking at the front door grew more insistent, and they both laughed. All right, Magnolia said, standing and smoothing her silk dress, a far cry from the mud-stained calico of that first day. Let's go see what the great state of Louisiana wants from the former swamp rat and her federal agent husband. As they walked toward the front door together, Magnolia caught a glimpse of herself in the hallway mirror. The reflection showed a confident woman in expensive clothes, but her eyes still held the same fierce independence that had made her refuse. Beauregard's offers entrust a mysterious stranger with her future. Some things, she thought with satisfaction, money couldn't change. And some things, like the love of a good man and the promise of children who would grow up free from the limitations that had once defined her world, were worth more than all the oil in Louisiana. The future stretched ahead of them, rich with possibility and bright with promise, just like the land that had seemed worthless until someone brave enough to look deeper discovered the treasures it held beneath the surface.